Yo, yo, yo. This is Isaiah Diesel here coming from all the way from South Korea, where I guess a Christian said I should be attending church right now at 12 o'clock at night. So I'm playing hooky today to do this podcast with a very special reoccurring guest slash host, Mr. Scott. Thank you so much for joining us today at RHG Podcast.
Hey, nice to be here, man.
Whew, got a bit of a rough one here. I'm not gonna lie. So trigger warning right off the top. We're gonna be talking about some serious topics, and since we're small, I don't have to worry about getting demonetized and losing like $1 or $2 that I might make a video. So we're not gonna hold any punches or use any kind of like I don't know, how do you say it, like, what's the word I'm looking for? It's referring to suicide.
Language, politically correct, or
Yeah,
soft
PC
language.
or coded. Coded is the word. So we're not going to say
Coded,
anything
yeah.
like self-terminate or whatever. If I lose out on $1.50, I think I'll live. But anyway, this is a very serious topic. So all jokes aside, I do want to just jump right into this one. Because as I said, it is 12 o'clock at night here. So I only have an hour or so. And all right. Well, I do want to say that I was in high school whenever the Columbine shooting happened. And I'm not sure if many people remember this, but the internet was around. I mean, it had been around for some time, but it certainly wasn't anything even close to the level that it is right now. And but still, though, there are a lot of shootings that took place prior to Columbine in America, unfortunately. But this was like the first big one that like it was easy to circulate and get to talking about. But if you've noticed anything, that even though this one was shocking, that one was shocking. It's almost like it just become part of the everyday occurrence right now.
Yeah, it's. I was looking at the statistics this morning, and it's like we've had 23 school shootings, including this last one, just this year alone, which we are far surpassing other countries. And looking at the correlations, correlations aren't causation, but a lot of people correlate mental illness and mental problems and depression in this country with the shootings. And the fact of the matter is that the mental health issue is no bigger than it is in other countries. In fact, it's better than certain countries where there are no mass shootings, hardly ever. So they're kind of looking at the mental health thing is kind of off the table. It's more of a heart thing. It's more of a family values thing. It's more of a bullying issue. It's more of how culture teaches males to react to situations in general that lead to that. And in the extreme cases, it's that on top of parents just not being involved in their children's lives to even know that they have issues and problems at school and stuff like that. So it's a major issue.
I'm just curious. Have you ever seen? I think it's Dylan Klebold's mom, who was one of the mass shooters. She did like a TEDx talk, and she released a book on it about what it's like, raising a mass shooter like that. And that's one of those things that really is quite baffling to me. How a parent could have this going on inside of their household and not pick up on the signs and stuff, And recently, I saw a documentary about this 14-year-old boy who went missing in the UK, and I shouldn't be joking. It's just so crazy that this happened. But for whatever reason, the guy had access to like an ATM machine, and he went and pulled out like $200 cash and like just bought a one-way ticket to London, and he wound up just never being seen again. But I was just thinking how crazy that is to give kids access, to something like that, and not knowing what they might do with it. That's really terrifying to me. You know that um, kids might have access to other things such as social media, and you're not really sure exactly who might be influencing them. You know,
I mean,
so I
it's
think there's a
yeah.
lot of different things we could talk on this, because I do want to talk somewhat about the spiritual side. I do want to talk about the mental health side, and I do want to talk about the bullying side, because I think um, you can't really just try to approach it from one issue. You know what I mean? Like you can. I know there's people on both sides who will try to approach it from a one-dimensional side, something like, well, just take away the guns, or that might be one approach, is just take away everyone's guns, and it's only like a side of it that is, you could just solve it easily like that. I mean, truth is, if you did take away the guns and they're still bullying and there's still very small accountability going on, people are going to find ways to kill a lot more people. The
Right.
guys at Columbine, they had plans to detonate bombs and such. So there's, whether it be fires, I mean, especially these days they have drones and stuff, you know what I mean? You could outfit drones to kill people, and to self-terminate. You can outfit drones to terminate people for you if you want. So and people have done it, that's not like theoretical, you know.
I agree with you, and and I also look at the solution from a I try to be very realistic about it because it's a serious issue. Like there's some things we can do systematically to help, but we have to be realistic. Like, I mean, let's start off and just say if there were absolutely no guns that anyone had access to, obviously there would be less school mass shootings. I mean, that's just logic. That's just logical. Question is um how feasible is that? How realistic is that? Are
Right.
we really going to get all the guns off the street in America? Are we really going to be able to take away people's guns? Are people going to go along with that idea? No. The answer is no. So the solution, because if you think about it, I remember going to school way back in the 80s, um, and kids had rifles in the back of their truck, right in their cars and trucks. And because I went to a southern school, they went hunting with their father. They had they had their rifles up in their truck and stuff. Like, nobody did a school shooting. Nobody took
Hmm.
it that far. Everybody, if you had a problem with another dude, you fought it out. Even if you were a geek or a nerd, even they would get beat up in fights, but at least they were
Yeah.
fighting and standing up for themselves. And so, my whole solution, number one, is to start with, you know, as they say, like soft society makes weak people. You know, if you soften kids up, they're going to be weak and they're going to be bullied and they're going to take it out on, they're going to get their dad's guns and they're going to shoot up the school because they need to go into self-defense. They need to learn how to stand up for themselves, build a little self-esteem. I mean, it's more than just that, but that's part of it. I think that's, I mean, I'm not a, expert in the field, but it just seems to me that back in those days, kids used to fight it out at school ground, and that's why we never really had a lot of school shootings. Maybe that's part of it. Being
That is
more.
interesting.
Mhm.
Go ahead, please.
Oh, I was just going to say, fathers can, you know, I'm not saying teach your kid how to just beat the crap out of somebody. I'm saying that maybe they should go to some martial arts school, learn discipline, learn how to stand up for themselves. I mean, in their speech, in their talk. You know, I dealt with that too when I went to school. When I put my son through school in Southern California, he had some problems with some kids that were from like Compton and other bad neighborhoods in the area, and the school threw everybody together. And my son, being a black child, kind of light skinned, his dad's light skinned, his mom's black. So he was picked on for racial reasons from other black kids from Compton who didn't see him as a real, in whatever. And he had all kinds of problems like that. But I told him, fight back, stand up for yourself, defend yourself. And he did. And now my kid's against bullying in school, has run campaigns against bullying in school. He's always at the forefront of being protective of kids who can't protect themselves. He went to martial arts, he lifts weights, he's very athletic. He never starts a fight, because I've taught him discipline by sending him to karate classes, same things I went through, and just teaching him as a father to be more, you know, love yourself first of all, and protect yourself. You're worth it, and he's never had that issue ever since then.
So I do want to talk about you talking about taking someone's dad's gun and shooting. I do want to save that to a little bit later, but I do want to say one other thing too. I think I've told you this before, but I grew up in Bakersfield, California, which is like the historical backdrop of the Grapes of Wrath, and so we got a lot of people from like the Midwest, a lot of Okies, where I'm from. And one of these guys lived right next door to my cousin, whose dad was an Okie too. I might add. I grew up. I grew up. I was just thinking about this. I grew up with cousins who were Japanese, white, and black. So for me to have any kind of like, oh, you're half this, half that, just would make no sense. It's hard for me to even compute that language into my mind, because I've loved people who are, half white and half black, and just inside of my family. But anyway, I digress. But my cousin was having some beef with the boy next door, and his dad came over, and he's like, "Hey, look, man, our sons, they have some beef." He said, "Like, I'm from the old school. The way we do it, man, is we have our boys box it out in the backyard, and I'm not sure if I'd go along with that, but my cousin's dad was an Okie, so they did that. So, and actually, I'm sure you're probably aware of this. I'm not sure if they do this anymore, but they used to have in the system. They used to have in prisons that like if anybody had beef throughout the week, like on Fridays, they'd get to like box it out and stuff, and that helped.
Dude,
So,
I was just gonna, you're just kind of triggering me, because back when I lived here in Florida, when I was a kid coming up, we used to have neighborhoods, neighborhood squabbles, and so every Friday, really it didn't matter what day, after school we'd all meet over at my house, and my brother, who was Florida State champion judo player, would sponsor these neighborhood fights in our backyard. So kids in the neighborhood, you'd see them coming off. They'd be taking their shirt off, walking down the street. Because I went to, a majority black school, and I was like the only white kid. So I was always in fights anyway. So then it just turned into, you know what, guys, screw it. Let's just all come to my house. If you want to beat my ass so bad, let's come to my house and let's just fight it. Oh, and dudes were more than happy. And it wasn't just me and other guys. It was my brothers and other guys, or it was other guys against other guys. And that was almost like a way for me to get along with kids at school, because they knew me as the dude that would host these backyard brawls in my backyard.
That is crazy.
And it was crazy, yeah.
But so I do want to bring this back home to talk the issue at hand, because the key thing when I was taking notes today is that the really disturbing thing about these school shootings is that like the vast majority of them are done by kids themselves, like it would be disturbing enough if adults are going into schools and shooting them up. It's not like that would be any better, but like it's I think it compounds the fact that someone is at the age of 14 years old with their entire lives ahead of them, and they'll never get to go down the road of self-discovery and being able to confront their bullies in a meaningful or constructive manner. And they feel that this is the only way to solve the issue at hand, you know? So I can't say I'm completely behind the idea of having people box it out at school.
Hmm.
Um, I'm not saying I have the exact solution, but I do know one thing, that the current rate that things are going right now, like something needs to happen, and we need to be having discussions. And you know, before we started, you saw me. I got a bit emotional because I am someone who has been on both sides of the bullying. Started young, getting bullied self, and then by myself. And so one of the ways I hate this fact talking about this, but you know, I just finished a bullying camp here a couple of weeks ago, which is why I haven't streamed for the last like month. I've been really busy with this, but you
Hmm.
know, I do have a half Asian kid here, and so the idea to not take on bullying to me is like it's especially when half kids get bullied so much here. I couldn't. I couldn't be a father and not at least put this, you know, out there in the ether that I am trying to do something about this topic. But um, you know, in doing this wasn't really an ant. I mean, we got to talk a lot about the camp was based on VR, and we did get to talk about bullying, especially like cyberbullying and such. You know, where um, it's not even these days, it's not even just entirely physical. I mean, back in the day, that's how it was. You know what I mean? Just physical. But there's also the element now of like uh, cyberbullying and such. You know, and that adds a completely different ball of wax. But go ahead.
I think another thing that plays a role, maybe a lot of people aren't aware, some people are. I've read about this too this morning, is that a lot of the other connection is dating, like guys that can't really, they aren't really good with girls, you know, they're kind of shy, they're kind of withdrawn. Those are also sort of red flags too, because all of this sort of comes to, for me, this is all coming back to a self-esteem issue. When kids, especially males, let's look at the correlations. Most of the school shootings are done by kids. They're males, and they have access to firearms, and they're bullied, and they don't really have a lot of a strong social life. You know, we're social animals, so it's not natural for kids to be isolated like that, especially with the bullying online that goes on these days, and then it carries on into the school. All of their peers look at them like less than a man, you know, less than a male is supposed to live up to. There's a whole lot of things. They can't get a date, they can't strike it up with a female. This is where fathers come in. This is where dads can come in and help their sons, you know, learn how to interact, you know, with females, learn how to deal with confrontation at school, and bullying online and stuff like that, monitoring. I'm telling you, man, I think that the strongest correlations for me, in my opinion, seem to be lack of family structure or interaction between fathers, mothers, and their sons. That's what's going on, I think, for the most part.
Yeah, I think this most recent shooter, there was quite a bit of stuff that was going on. And I know this is unrelated to that specifically, but it does have to do with, you know, juveniles being shot. One of the issues that seemed to get overlooked in the whole Trayvon Martin shooting was that this was like an extremely disturbed, troubled kid, you know? And
Hmm.
He's gotten into a lot of trouble, gotten kicked out of school, and obviously his parents were either divorced or separated. I don't know exactly, but he didn't have his father there stably in his home. And I know, you yourself separated, and I myself went through divorce myself. But that's one of the things that, like, um, is as hard as it is. It seems like, even if there is a divorce, like, the one thing you have to do, no matter what, is to be, try to be as active as you possibly could in your child's life, to make sure that they're not going astray. And because, I mean, I can just say this, and this is not picking on, Trayvon Martin or any of the black kids or inner city kids or anything like that. It's just because I grew up with a dad in my home. My dad is a minister, and my dad, he wasn't a perfect man, but I mean, they taught us. My parents taught me good values, and man, I just know people who have, God, I've just known people who, like, use drugs with their kids and stuff. Who's get their kids into the gang banging lifestyle. And I mean, I've just seen it firsthand. I've seen firsthand, witnessed with my own eyes, like, actual physical child abuse and addiction and stuff like that. So these are things, like, you have demons and stuff. I guess we can just say, first and foremost, as people, is that we got to start first with personal work.
Hmm.
Because knowing that you could pass on some of these demons, hypothetical or metaphorical demons, onto your kids. Um, that is one of the things that motivates me to just get rid of all the crap that's in my life. Because I'll be the first Christian to admit there's a lot of garbage that I would be so embarrassed if my daughter found out about me. Luckily, she's only 6 years old. She can't really know the difference, and I've gotten a lot better since she's been born. But it's one of the things that motivates me to want to be a better person. That I'm being a better role model and consistent and ethical person. So I think this is a good point to start right there.
Yeah, I think
Um,
really, I think there's two things there. What you said that really ring home true to me too is that the most important thing is to be a good example rather than just tell your kid, do as they say, not as they do type thing, but actually be a good example for your kid and then let them know you have their back regardless. Even if you don't give them everything or can't give them everything in the world, if
mhm.
you are limited with your resources to do for your child as they want you to do, and sometimes that's not even a good thing to give your child everything they freaking want.
Right. Sometimes
Um,
it's too bad.
but just just be there, at least do enough to let them know I got your back. I'm your hero. I'm someone that's gonna always
Right.
save you if you needed it. But I'm also gonna teach you to be a little more self-reliant, um, and to and then be a good example. Don't don't if you're a violent father and you show your son all this violence in your life, is it any surprise that your son's also going to want to pick
Right.
up a gun and act out
Right.
violently? I mean, you're his example.
Um, and I do want to transition. Yeah, I do want to transition to something else, because, and this has to do with, keeping my own side honest. Though I don't consider myself by any stretch of the imagination like right wing or like a Christian nationalist. But there was a case last year of a transgender shooter. Um, I don't want to use any proper pronouns or whatever, but I believe this. I believe this person was a transgender male, and the shooter left this really complicated, like, a manifesto, and they just recently released it this last week. You familiar with that?
No, not really.
They shot a lot of people at a Christian school, and they left a manifesto that they weren't releasing it for like, they didn't release it for a year, and then they finally released it. And basically what they were saying was they said that this, and I don't know, I haven't read this, I haven't read anything about this, so I'm just kind of going off of secondhand data here. But what I really want, the reason why I'm mentioning this is because there have been recently a wave of LGBT plus shooters. I have heard people from the right just rushing over and being like, "Oh, look at these people! Look what they're doing!" You know what I mean? They're doing all these shootings, and they're non-binary, or they're transgender, or they're LGBT plus. Because I believe this last shooter was LGBT plus as well. But I want to be very clear on this, because I have to be just extremely blunt and straightforward. But also, I do not want anyone taking what I'm about to say like in the wrong way, because nothing ever comes close to justifying these kind of acts of violence. So unless you preface the kind of stuff you're saying, people can easily distort what you're trying to say. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And the only point I'm trying to make is that, look, we have to work on this bullying part. 1, 2, if you're going to really go on, and they love to talk about how mentally unstable these people are. And if that's what you truly believe, that's your right. But on the other side of that, the flip side of that is like, why are you going to do stuff that's intentionally trying to trigger or, upset these people, be it dead naming or misgendering? It's these people are already on the brink of something that's going on in their lives, and I don't see why someone would want to be a straw that broke this person's back. So for me, I don't personally agree with that entire side, but on the flip side of that, I don't want to be the cause of someone's bad day. You know what I mean? I don't want to be the cause of someone going home and maybe hurting themselves, or a cat, or someone else, God forbid someone else. I don't want that blood on my hands. So, attacking these people online, or, dead naming or misgendering, whatever that might be, that seems like, if you really believe all this bad stuff that you're saying about these people, we should be trying to get them help, and at least at bare minimum, not contributing to the problem.
Right. You should be more compassionate in your approach, because, but we live in a world where everybody's so disconnected through social media that more people are more interested in pushing a narrative. They're more interested in showing you how LGBTQ people are evil and bad, and these school shootings prove it. So they're not really interested in solving the problem. They're more interested in exposing how people live their lives in a way that they don't like. It goes against their religious beliefs. It goes against their political beliefs, and things they've swallowed through churches and through political organizations and advertising. They're more interested in, they're orgasmic when these shootings happen, because they're like, all right, now we've got more fuel to put down the this group, or whatever group they want to put down that happen to be involved, instead of actually looking at it from a very compassionate point of view, like maybe something like Jesus would do. Maybe Jesus would be more compassionate. But it's easy to hate on someone who kills a bunch of kids. I get it. With that particular individual, I get it.
Right.
But let's look at the problem as a whole. Like, how can we mitigate the issue? But then they'll turn around and then, contradict themselves and say, oh, it was just a psyop. It's all just the government. It's a false flag attack. It wasn't real. It's just like Sandy Hook, just like Columbine, just like, no, these things really happened. Families were really hurt. And whether you believe it's a psyop or not, I would rather err on the side of compassion and feel sorry for the families that lost their children, rather than try to blame it on the boogeyman and that it never happened.
I have to say right now, I'm going to cut in here. There is something that is deeply, deeply, deeply disturbing from Christians as far as this is concerned. And I don't care if this gets demonetized. I don't care if this gets me banned forever. I'm just going to say it. Man, this is absolutely 100% antichrist. It's anti-biblical. These kind of events happen. And it's like what an absurd concept, right? In a place where people are getting bullied, where there's more guns than anywhere else in the planet, there just happen to be a bunch of school shootings, right? Like, you really think that that's that far off that these kind of things happen, like in America? Like, so that is just such an absurdity. People get shot, children get shot, and the first thing you start to worry about is your own fucking guns. That's the number one thing that you're worried that people are making stuff up. You're going to dismiss people's hurt, people's losses for the sake of protecting your own material possessions. I mean, I got to show you this. I got a Timothy 6:8 tattooed right here. And this says, having food and clothes, let us be content with that. And it's a part of this whole scripture series that says, in fact, it's where the whole the love of money is the root of all kinds of evil. People frequently misquote that to say money is the root of all evil, but that's not what the Bible says. It says the love of money is the root of all kinds of evil, because there's obviously a bunch of evil, such as just just hurting people just for the sake of it. That has nothing to do with money. But anyway, that scripture, I heard that in Bible college, and I really wasn't even a Christian myself at that point, but I thought how profound that is, just having the basics in life, to be content with that. Not that you can't have more, that's wrong, but to be content with whatever you have in the situation. And there's so many Christians who are like, I mean, I've seen these pictures, they're posing for family Christmas, and there's all these families sitting around with these like AKs and not AKs, but like, AR-15s. And I'm thinking, oh my sweet mother Jesus, these people will say, you can pry the guns from my cold dead fingers, right? And so, like, do you think you're going to bring these guns to heaven? Do you think you're going to get to heaven holding on to any kind of material possessions? Forget the guns for a second, whether it be prestige or cars or houses or 401ks. Like, you think that that's going to somehow help you to get to heaven faster, or you really believe that? Because I know you don't believe in the Bible, but from talking to other Christians, it's like, okay, what you believe in is that that you believe you're against idolatry. You want the 10 commandments up in the in schools, and this is what you're promoting. Okay, you're promoting the 10 commandments. The 10 commandments talks about not having things before God, not worshiping things, and you're sitting here saying, I would rather die than to have you remove this possession from me. It's insane.
That's right, man.
And you disappeared. Are you there?
Yeah, I disappeared. Can you hear me now?
Sorry. Go ahead.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
It's all about values, and a lot of times people who are not connected to a tragedy like that personally, it's easy for them to be really political about it and very tribal about it. They've been fed this conspiracies, and it may be, it may be true to some extent. It may be that, under political pressure, Democrats would be willing to try to take everyone's guns away. That's fine. You can believe that. I kind of believe it's very possible. I don't think it's possible that they could get away with it. I think there's too many guns on the street. I don't think they would take that seriously, but they do pander to their lobbyists, just like conservatives
got 3 days these days.
Yeah, I mean, we've had how many senators? 20 plus senators just over the last year have received $1 million from the NRA, and they've taken that money, those gifts. That's how powerful money is. Money talks, you know what I'm saying? And it goes on both sides. Conservatives, professional politicians are willing to let more people die because of whatever reason, whether it's big pharma, the big guns, the big whatever, as long as they lace their pockets. But it's the same thing with the Democrats. They're willing to take away your rights if it suits their power base. You know what I'm saying? They that's just the nature of politics and everything. It's the corruption. And it's why I'm not a corporatist. I'm not a Republican, because Republicans are corporatists. They've sold themselves out to the big corporations years ago. But the same with the Democrats. They do the same damn thing. They all are sponsored by big corporate media, big corporate pharmaceutical industry, this and that, the gun industry. So really you have to take it on your personal, at the personal level, to make a difference. And I truly believe that you can actually, from the grassroots, make a difference in things that you value. If you want to cut down on gun violence, let's promote more family values. You know, if is religion an engine for change for you? Is that what's going to motivate you to be more involved in your children's life and do the right thing? Then fine. We need more religion in your life then. Great. Um, but it starts at that level, at the individual level. I'm all about self accountability. In that way, I'm a conservative, but I'm not for all of this pandering to the right and pandering to the party. You know what I mean?
Right.
That's not what conservatism is all about, anyways.
But Scott, yeah, that's good. Scott, you know where I live, right?
Hmm.
Where do I live?
In South Korea.
South Korea, right? Um, and are you familiar with any of the gun laws or anything like that here?
Not really. Probably more
Okay.
restrictive.
The only thing you're aware of is that they got nuclears, like, aimed right at us. Like I always tell
Hmm.
people, actually, just yesterday I was teaching an adult class and I was talking about how you could like get away with telling like white lies or half truths and stuff, or presenting something that's not, it might be technically true, but it's like not exactly true because South Korea is technically at war with North Korea, but it's
Hmm.
obviously not like Ukraine or anything like that. They have an armistice that they've had for like 60 years or
Hmm.
whatever. um More like 70 years at this point, but anyway. So yeah, they're still technically a war, but it's not like there's actual fighting going on. And but I told them, though, I was trying to explain what I was teaching them, because I have adult students, and I was teaching them about this concept of being on the nose, this expression of a gut shot or being on the nose. And the way that I was able to explain this to them, that they really got it, was I showed him a meme of these 10 commandments in schools, and these kids were hiding behind them as bullets were whizzing by. And it says, "Man, I'm really glad they installed the 10 commandments uh, in our classes." And I was like, man, I don't think I've ever seen something hit on the nose as much as this. This might be the prime example I've seen, because uh, people, Christians specifically, they're really caught up on these little teeny tiny issues such as the 10 commandments right now. And there's much bigger pressing issues that are at hand right now, that it seems like. And because you mentioned right now, you just mentioned about not being totally conservative, or whatever. I can respect people on both sides, but my issue personally, which is why I don't vote, even though I live overseas, I could vote, but I don't vote, is because for me, the issue is that I feel like I'm relegating responsibility to do something to another person who I don't know if they're really going to actually follow through with the things that they say that they're going to do or they want to do. You know what I mean? I don't know that. I mean, they could get in there, they could just be saying certain things to pander to certain groups. I'm not sure how much of this they actually believe in. So
Hmm.
we might have no intention of fixing the border or the economy or whatever it might be.
Hmm.
They certainly know how to talk about it. I
Hmm.
mean, if talking got stuff done in politics, we wouldn't have any issues at all. You know what I
None
mean?
at all.
So um, I just came up with that on the spot.
That's
But
good.
but that's yeah, that's one of the things. There's lots of pressing issues, and there's just lots of stuff. And to get back to South Korea, this is probably going to shock you, but well, one, I'm too poor to afford a car here, so I have a bike, and it's an electric bike. It's pretty nice. It's gifted to me, but dude, I have a lock. I don't even lock it up, man. I just
Right.
park it, man. And you don't even know this. Yeah, I know you know this, but in America, man, if you have a lock, you still get that thing stolen. You gotta nail that thing down somewhere. You know what I mean? You gotta really
Yeah.
make sure it's because so you just have situations like that. You don't have drugs. You don't have gangs. You don't have you said being more restrictive. I believe here in Japan, you can still technically get guns, but the thing is, they make you jump through a lot of hoops and a lot of red tape. And I believe this might also be the same as Korea as it is in Japan. But if you do have guns, you can't even store them at your house. They have to
Yeah.
you have to go out and get them. And plus you have to you just have to pass things like background checks. You have to, like vision tests, stuff like that. I think it's like every 1 or 2 years you got to go and renew this license and make sure that everything's on the up and up. So what are your thoughts on restrictions? Okay, obviously we're not. I mean, it's a fool's errand to think you could take. You'd have to kill basically half of America because half of America is saying you could pry the guns from our cold dead fingers. So that's obviously not going to happen. But what are some common sense, you know, ordinary stuff that you think that we could be doing in the
Yeah. So,
here now?
for me, I think that the reason why a lot of other countries don't have the gun problem isn't because of the laws, the stricter laws necessarily. I think it's because they're different cultures altogether. Like if you've ever lived around Japanese people, they're not the same. We're not the same. They're not going to approach life in the same way.
Mhm.
They don't have the same issues that we worry about here, and that's why they have a totally different culture even before all those gun laws and this and that. They've never been famous for mass shootings and atrocities and things like that because they live in a
Well, they've
very
done
different.
atrocities. Don't
Yeah,
go there. But I get what you're saying.
you know what I'm saying? Like, I mean, there are always situations where like these socialist countries turn around and kill all their people, and the first thing to do is they take away their guns, they take away their books, and they start executing people that are against that idea. And so, Germany is an example. You can look at other countries as well. I can name off like a bunch of old Turkish, the Byzantine Empire, the same way, I guess. Different places have exterminated their citizens, and the first thing they did was take away their guns and right to defend themselves. I think that's a basic common right. But what you're asking is, are those restrictions necessary or helpful, or would they be helpful or necessary? I think maybe they would be helpful, obviously, but we have so many laws on the books now. People just simply don't obey the law because they value their guns over the law, over the Bible,
Right.
over so many things. They just and they call themselves Christians. That's the ironic thing about it.
Right.
Just crazy, man.
So, okay, yeah, a lot of what you said it was right about Japan. I mean, obviously, they've done some pretty mess up stuff here in South Korea, the Philippines in the past. I think they pretty much mellowed out after that. They're like, you know what I mean? They got it.
Mhm.
It's amazing what a couple of nuclear bombs getting dropped on you could do to you, your country. But
Yeah.
there was like this tsunami that hit them, and if you were to contrast the the response to when their tsunami happened as to like what happened in Katrina. Whenever you were having like people saw this as an opportunity to loot and riot, um, what they did there was they operated in a very methodical and very I just say this like the first thing they said, okay, we got to first thing we got to do, we got to take care of the elder people, you know, the women, the children, take care of them first. And um, you know, there wasn't any. I think the last thing that would have came into their mind would be doing stuff like you know, looting and rioting and trying to make things worse for people. I mean, I saw something very similar happen in after the earthquake in Haiti when I was down there, and I wrote it. I wrote about this in a book that I wrote about it. And the director there, I asked him. I said, I don't understand how people could be like, after this earthquake happens that kills 200,000 people, um, you could have rioting and, you know, people stealing stuff and hurting people. And he flat out told me, he said something I'll never forget, man. He said, Isaiah, he says, the higher the necessity, the lower the civility. And I was like, whoa, that was like a gut punch right there. And I realized that, man, shit, man, if it comes down to my daughter surviving and someone else's, like, I would not want to, I would not want to have to make that decision, you know, in a certain point, because I know that um, certain things could drive me to, you know, to do certain things to try to defend my daughter. You know, I know that's a different situation, but I think in Japan, um, they just have like a code of honor, like and respect. That is a, it's beautiful. I've been there like 10 times, and the most like even doing stuff like graffiti and littering, like you won't see that. You will not see any graffiti or littering in that whole country, man. And you don't have to go around telling people like not to do that. Um,
Right.
it just they understand that there's a society. We're in this together, you know, and I think that a lot of that has been lost in America, man.
Oh yeah. That's what I'm telling
To the
you.
politics, yeah,
That's the superpower. That's the superpower we have that no one really wants to admit to for some weird reason. It's like our superpower is in the fact that we can have strong families. We have the ability to build up strong families. That could be our superpower. But because our culture has really just is so materialistic, it's so materialistic that it has quelched the desire to have a family anymore. Like today when I talked to my kids, like they were with me this summer and just talking about culture these days and talking about what the kids are into and what they talk about, you know, nobody really values marriage, nobody really values having children. Everybody's sort of selfish. They're like, you know, and you can understand it. The men are like, why should I get married if I know that all she's going to do is divorce me and take my child away from me, and then I got to pay child support and alimony and all this money, and in my life I'll never see my child, never have any engagement with my child, because they're so leaning towards the women. The women look at it like, why do I want to get married to a guy I can do bad all by myself? You know, if the guy doesn't have a job, doesn't provide for me, what's the point? I might as well just provide for myself. I don't need a man for that. Um, so I don't really need a family. I don't need kids. It's like we're losing that. And then at the same time, we have these natural urges. Women have this natural need to find a long term partner and and to have children. Their little biological clocks aren't going to stop ticking just because culture changes and rap music changes. That's not going to change it. Um, and so you've got this confusion going on in society. We have so many competing messages going on in America, like have more things, have a career versus you need to be more family oriented. You need to be, you know, I think that, you know, women that stayed home to raise their children came out a lot better. My wife was a stay at home wife. And my children have come up strong because of that. They've had their mom there for them. They've had their dad in their life. I mean, these are just, I understand that a lot of people are going to listen to that and be like, oh, that's just that old time country
Uh,
dad
yeah, well,
thing.
you remember what that lady was saying whenever we were talking about, and I was talking about why I didn't believe it was appropriate for women to be like soldiers or cops,
Yeah.
or guarding the president. And even though I was saying it for completely reasons to like um, protect women, it was seen as like massage. The
Yeah.
irony of that statement.
Boomer mentality. They call it boomer mentality.
Boomer.
You're a boomer.
Right, right. Well, you're closer to being a boomer than I am, so
Yep.
yeah,
Yep.
you're closer there. But a couple of things I want to end off with. One of them is okay. So this is a bit of a different, interesting situation because in the last couple of like mass shootings, they're like, man, we're going after the parents this time.
Yeah.
And although I generally would be against that, like in general principle, because you could raise a kid to do the right thing and then they just screw up. You know what I mean? Like I could tell you this, like, because my parents are ministers, and I swear this, if I had $1 for every time this happened to me, I'd probably be able to buy like a couple of pizzas or something right now. But like I would be out, we'd be causing some trouble with me and some of the other kids from the youth, and then they'd catch us doing the trouble, and then they'd look everyone down, and then they would like, boom, they'd make eye contact with me, and they'd be like, aren't you the pastor's kid? And I'm like, yeah. And they're like, shouldn't you know better than like what you're doing? And I was like, yeah, I actually do know better. They're like, well, what are you doing? I'm like, well, do you not think that I'm like a human being? I'm capable of making mistakes, And I heard that so many times growing up. But so I'm not saying that, you can that you can't hold the parents responsible for everything that kids do. Because, sometimes kids just want to defy their parents. So you have that. But then you have a situation like what went down. And I gotta say, man, like I don't think it's appropriate to um I do not think it's appropriate to charge the parent with murder. That might be a little bit too extreme, but it's what this guy's saying. If you know your child is like has issues, especially if they're medicated, for God's sake, if they're medicated, but you already know that they have these tendencies, they're antisocial or whatever, and you give them active, man, something's got to happen to you. Either you got to be fiscally liable, or they need to like permanently take away your guns, or something's got to like. You cannot let this
Right.
go.
I agree with you 100%. Like, if the parents are held accountable, I think we could possibly see a big turnaround, because a lot of these parents simply are these pro-gun folks that celebrate guns and buy their guns. I bet you his dad probably bought the guy his gun. I don't know. Um, and they love guns so much they pass it down in their family, and then they never think that there's any responsibility that goes along with it. Well, it's time to make people responsible for the things they do. If you're going to provide access to a gun for your kid, then you better understand you're taking a big risk. You know what I'm saying? And these
Right, right,
laws should apply to but I don't think he should be tried for murder. I think that's a little bit
right.
extreme. It doesn't really
It's
match. There's something off balance with
so
that.
so there's a couple of things. I think in a wrongful death suit, obviously, because you can't sue this 14-year-old boy. One, you couldn't legally sue him, but two, they don't have anything you could get from them. So I don't know. Maybe if this kid had to work for the rest of his life in like a prison labor camp and then give them some kind of restitution, maybe you might make a case that way. But specifically with this dude's dad, Um, even if you just take out the FBI investigation or the Facebook, any of that other stuff that might have happened, buying a gun for a kid and not having it locked away. I understand if you buy a gun for your kid. That's actually not the issue, especially if you're taking the kid out to shoot or to hunt. That's actually a completely different issue. But if you are giving a child unfettered access to that something's got to go wrong. This person put an accessory. I don't know exactly, but there has to be something,
Look,
even if it's just a couple of years or something, man. There has to be that. You have to decentivize this somehow,
look, you have to have a license to own a car. Sometimes I think some people shouldn't be allowed to have kids, you know, but you can't really figure that out. So it's kind of impossible. But I do feel that way. It's like some people just don't deserve to have kids because they don't interact with the kid. They don't raise them. They don't really have any, real concern about what's going on in their lives. I mean, this is like an example of that. And you see these people in public, out of control. Their kids are out of control. It's just, but how do you control something like that? You really can't. But I get what you're saying, man. It's like just people need to be held responsible. Everybody needs to be held responsible. If you bring kids in the world, you're the parent. You're responsible for what your kid does ultimately. Hell, if I have a dog and my dog goes out and bites a neighbor, I'm going to be held responsible for that crap.
Right. I think, regardless of the gun situation, though, I do not think atheists should be legally allowed to make more children. Because then they're going to spread this ideology. No, I'm just kidding. That's a total joke. But no, we're getting to the top of the hour, so I would like to get to some closing ideas. And
yeah, sure.
This is obviously not going to be hashed out in the course of a single podcast, and some of these ideas I just like to broach topics. And a former atheist host I had on here, he talked about putting a flag in the sand. And just something to come back to later on, so maybe stuff to think about. There was a line I said in here that I mean, I take notes. I had notes to write down here some stuff I want to talk about. But I think when you start to have some of these conversations, there's things that are subconsciously inside of you, and just we start to talk about things can start to click into your mind and make sense. So I think I definitely know that the way not to proceed forward is to not have conversations, or to not try to not to sweep things underneath the rug. I mean, I think that's what I want to get at is there's mental health issues that we need to destigmatize. I think that might be, if you only gave me one topic to say I could talk about with this, it would be that I think that might be able to make the biggest impact, because obviously there's 1,000 different things. I mean, for me, if I had the power to just make everyone a Christian, I would do that, because you would understand something very basic, that we're supposed to love our neighbors as ourselves. And the Bible talks about reducing all of the scripture, all of the everything, all the law down into that. So you love someone as yourself, you're not going to bully them. And if you are bullied, you're not going to retaliate by, shooting up a school. So, but obviously turn the other cheek. Obviously I don't have the ability to do that, but I mean, at the bare minimum, the thing I would want to do is to see people understand that we're on various stages of our journeys. We have no idea the background stories of what's going on in people's lives, hurt people, bullied people, bully other people. So understanding that, and not that that's gonna make the pain of getting bullied going away, but I do want to share just one story before I let you get to this, because I told you the story about my cousin boxing it out with his next door neighbor,
Hmm.
and but I saw a better story on Facebook about this young black dude. He's a young black dad. I mean, dude's probably in his 30s, 35, and his son was getting bullied at school, and he he befriended the, uh, the 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 bully, and understood what was going on. The kid didn't have a dad around, didn't have nice clothes or whatever. Helped him out with clothes, and you know, flipped him to being a friend for his son, and was helping him out with like learning and stuff. And I think that's a more compassionate way to go about with the bullies than to just want to see them punished. Like, I think
Right.
trying to be more understanding of where they're coming from and why they would do that in the first place. But please, Leos, thoughts?
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. It's you're just pointing to like these grassroots individual level ways of dealing with individual situations. And that's really going to be the most effective, fastest way to deal with stuff like that. But again, it depends on social. That's a social thing. It's like having a father willing to be friends with your bully and trying to get involved with them. That's not a law. That's not a state policy. You're talking about just individual dads being clever enough and
Right.
imaginative enough to come up with an idea like that. And that's a unique idea. Like I wouldn't have thought about that. Like when my son was being bullied, my approach was, well, go fight him. Let's find him. And he came to the door, and I told him, next time you use your martial arts, because my son was come back home screaming and crying, and the mom was like, "Oh, you need to tell the teacher. Oh, but if I tell the teacher, it'll make it worse." Like, "Oh,
Hmm.
don't do that. Tell the teacher. Don't take it in your own hands, whatever." I pulled my son to the side. I said, "Look, if dude puts his hands on you, you have every right to defend yourself. Tell the teacher, but if he puts his hands on you, defend yourself." Kid put his hands on my son. My son like broke his nose or whatever. And then we had a talk with the kid's grandma, and then we settled it. And then now the kid and my son are like best friends, play basketball every day. The kid learned respect from the kid. Now maybe that wasn't the best way to handle it because it still ended up with violence or whatever, but I just think that, that's a lot better than shooting somebody. I mean, I know if I had access to guns when I was a kid, I'd have probably shot my school up too. Let's just be real. I was bullied every freaking day, man. And I was angry little kid, boy. I was so angry, but my dad recognized it and put me in martial arts, and then I was just fighting kids every day. But that
Hmm.
was a lot better than getting my dad's gun and going to school and shooting everybody. You know what I'm saying? It's a grassroots thing. Um, but it's just the key elements here are fathers and mothers in their children's lives, that are paying attention and thinking and caring. And like I said, some people just don't deserve kids. They don't care enough, you know.
Yeah, you know what? And you and I was briefly telling you about the whole abortion thing earlier, and the irony is that so many Christians are willing to wanting to force women into getting, having pregnancies when they clearly are not psychologically capable at the time of taking care of these kids. I mean, um, yeah, actually, he makes a good point. Not just the parents, the community, but
Mhm.
clearly they're not in a
Yep.
position. If they would rather end the life as a mother, you have to know that this person's probably not in the best position at that time to be able to, take care of. Oh, I like this too. A child can be
Yes.
disciplined, but
Yeah,
yeah,
back in the day. Yep, that's true.
right. For my honeymoon, we went to Vegas, and we saw Carrot Top, and the guy who opened up for Carrot Top. I was just thinking about this because I was talking about this with my wife. Uh, but the guy who opened up for Carrot Top, he was talking about how going through Walmart and you see the way kids are misbehaving, and he goes, like, this guy's older, like in his 50s, and he's like, when I was growing up, he goes, you'd get hit at school, and he goes, I don't think that you should just be allowed to hit your own kids. He's like, you should be allowed to hit other kids, man,
Yeah,
because
exactly.
yeah, you see the kind of stuff that, and it's just unfortunate that you allow things to slide and keep going. They just get worse, and I think in my own life, things that happened in my own life that I didn't properly address till I was way too old as an adult, and then you're like um trying to play, catch up and shooting behind the eight ball, as they say, and how much of this stuff could be affected at a younger age. And I think now, that just the more that we've talked about this today, I think I've seen something has definitely came in more clearly to me, that just the importance of early childhood education and pushing character development in school,
Yep.
because first of all, this is a side issue, but how much of what you learn in school actually has no relevance in your life? Like, just take, for instance, math. It might be the actual reality that like 1% of people actually have to use the quadratic equation or Pythagoras theorem or whatever, you know what I mean? Like,
Hmm.
on a daily basis. When do you ever have to do that? But more often than not, you should be understanding how to budget or
Yes.
calculate interest on loans or credit cards or
Hmm.
whatever. The
Hmm.
whole prime mortgage loan, that came about because for this reason right here. Um, but then you just have stuff that's just not at all, EQ, for example. There might be pushing IQ, but there's no emotional intelligence like strongly pushed. And I think for someone like me, being Latino, poor Latino, East Side, you learn a lot of stuff, and then later on you have to unlearn it. And this whole machismo, like, I cannot tell you how many girlfriends I lost, or how many friendships I lost from this bullshit machismo mentalities. That oh, this guy's great. Who's this Ross guy? Do you have
Oh,
any
Ross,
idea who
I've
this is?
had him. Oh, yeah, he's a great guy.
This
We're
guy's
friends on
great.
Facebook, and we've talked on my show. Yeah, he's a great guy. Great
Hey
guy.
Ross,
Smart
thank you
guy.
for your input. Yeah, logic, math, yeah, definitely. And as I said, I didn't learn a lot of this stuff till I was like in my 20s, but at that point, you've already made a lot of mistakes, and it would have been helpful to learn some of this stuff at an earlier age. So I think, yeah, man, you could talk all day about laws and stuff, but I think at the end of the day, we could start just with some early childhood stuff, because the older you get, the harder stuff gets to unlearn.
You're more than welcome, Ross. He's just thanking me for the invite.
Right?
But yeah, you're right, man. It all boils down to, it's like no matter what president is in office. I mean, if I really look back and observe my life, I would have done the same things. I would have had the same pretty much opportunity. I think that speaks to our system in general. But whether Obama was in office or Trump was in office, my life was pretty well. I kept clicking along at the same rate. Nothing really changed. So everything that affected my life in a major way was individually done. It really didn't matter about who was in
Hmm.
office or what administration was pushing
Right,
what.
right, right,
So it's the same
right.
thing I think with this gun issue. It helps, if we have laws and we're able to implement the laws, you might be able to, stretch out, like say the red flag laws. If the Charleston shooter um was denied access to that gun, because after the 3-day thing he was able to get his gun. If they were actually to extend that to 10 days or something, it might have prevented that shooting. You never know.
Right.
So there's things you can do, but for the most part, you have to address um, the mental side of it. You know, the self
Right.
esteem of children, the development of kids, like you said, that's so important. And we need parents to step up. You can't expect teachers
Right.
to be the replacement of mothers and fathers. You know, you have to be mothers and fathers and take that responsibility seriously. We don't have that Japanese sort of culture though, do we? We don't have that sort of strict kind of traditional culture, even with
Yeah.
that you see in with Africans, with Haitians, Jamaicans. These people, I know these people culturally, and I've been around these people, all kinds of Jamaicans, Haitians, Africans, people like that, Japanese people, Chinese people. I work with one. They're very family oriented, man. Very
Right.
proud of their sons and their daughters' education, and they're very
Right.
meticulous about
Right.
discipline. And it's different.
Yeah, this is a whole nother conversation. Maybe I could have this one on you again, with you again, because yeah, it is. They probably go a little bit overboard with it. They have these
Yeah,
expressions, tiger mom or helicopter mom.
yeah,
Helicopter mom
yeah,
is the one that they use here, and it's very true. You know what I mean?
yeah.
And I think it's very easy to get judgmental towards it because I've seen the bad side of it.
Hmm.
Obviously, living here. But
Yep.
on the other side, I'm like, man, if you're going to make an error in any direction, I would make the error that these people make, which is maybe pushing a little bit too hard. You know what I mean? Because they have honor in, you know, going to good school and, you know what I mean, graduating and, working hard. I mean, fatherlessness is just, you mentioned that being father, that is a non-issue here. Like, it's just a non-issue. You know what I mean? There's honor. And this gets down to Confucianism, where like there's these social structures that um there's just like you have to honor these things. One of them is a father to the son, and they maybe put a little bit too much emphasis on that one rather than with the women. But there's just this idea though that like it's the most common sense thing. Like you bring a child into this world, it is your responsibility to rear that being, to adulthood, and for the son to listen to the father. There's a respect there as well, because I mentioned about wanting to rebel against the parents, but for them, it's like, this is your dad. I know sometimes it's bad because they might make the decisions to what you might do with your life or who you might marry. So I said they go a little bit overboard with it, but um, there's this idea of a respect, you know what I mean? And having your grandparents around. I showed you that picture. This is gonna be the last thing I say. Said what this generation needs, and it has this grandmother who's getting ready to whip a kid with a switch. You remember that one?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
The grandmother's wielding that thing. Is like, this is what this generation needs, is having that the I guess the wisdom from the older generation, because here, like, this is literally the last thing I'm going to say right now, because got it. It's already almost 2 here. But when I first came to South Korea, my first girlfriend, um, first of many, but that's another point. But I mentioned about like we might need to be putting my grandmother in a old folks home, and she was like, what is that? And I was like, it's like a place where like older people go to like live together. And she, like that concept, it couldn't even register into her mind. Like, she's like, why wouldn't they go live with the oldest son, like to help with the children? Like, it literally, she couldn't even wrap her mind around it. So they keep the older people around to help raise the kids, and that's something that I've seen here. I mean, that's once again, maybe we'll just have to do a whole other topic on that part alone, because the elders there being there to help foster in the next generation and to help ease some of that load off the parents. it's kind of like they say they have like a built-in um, babysitters in the house
Yep.
because they have their brothers around there. And yeah, but anyway, Scott, thank you very much. Yeah, we could talk probably the next another hour on this, but
Easily.
yeah, thank you for the talk. And maybe there just have to be, we'll have to do a part 2 of this. And we put some flag marks in the sand. And, yeah, flags in the sand, and we're about to come back to this and revisit this. So thank you everyone for joining us today. And that other gentleman, what was his name? Ross. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, thank you very much for your input. Hopefully this can help start to foster in the conversation, that well-needed conversation that needs to be had. And yeah, check us out again. And I'm signing out.